Now we have the Secretary of Energy, Stephen Chu, and innovator galore, CEO and product architect at Tesla, CEO of SpaceX, and creator of PayPal, Elon Musk. Elon, thank you for joining us. We'll put Elon here and Stephen there. It'll be great. So we're going to have, again, have some fun, have a bit of an informal chat with two giants. And I thought I would start it off a little bit fun, maybe a little bit risque, that I understand, Stephen, that you have a Nobel Prize on your wall. And that some people have said, hey, when you're dealing with Congress and talking about sequesters, maybe you should take it off the wall, and when you're having a meeting with that senator and say, hey, here's what I've got, what do you have?
Bad idea.
Bad idea. Hasn't worked for you. I also heard at one of the inaugural dinners, Will.i.am came up to you and said, you know, Stephen, you're really, really cool, but one way to get even cooler is to change your name to MC Energy, bitch.
Taking it on
Is that true?
It's true.
And you did go around that night and well, I thought we'd start, Elon, it's great to have you with us out from California. And I thought we'd start the conversation in an interesting way because, Stephen, you're known for investing and thinking about the transition from non-fossil fuel energy to renewable energy, trying to think about how you systematically do that, bring science and innovators and government resources to get together to do it. You're going to be leaving fairly shortly. I assume you've announced that you're going to be leaving your post. Elon Musk is here. He's quite an innovative guy. He's gotten a lot of awards. And I'm just sort of interested in starting off the conversation by asking you, should President Obama call you and say, would you like his job? How would you do it differently?
Wow. Well, I think Steve's done a pretty awesome job, actually. I think I'd have a hard time doing a better job. So, and I think being secretary of anything is a really tough role to hold, and one where you tend to get, I think, a lot more criticism than praise, no matter what job you do. So,
well, when you think about it, drill down a little bit
it's not a role to which I would aspire.
I mean, you're a young man. You've revolutionized payments. You've done a lot of revolution in cars and batteries. You're now revolutionizing our access to space. And you're doing this in part on the backs of scientists and other innovators and some government investments, but you're outpacing what government has been able to do. And so my question was not a facetious one. It was, if you were able to not have the environment, if you were able to basically jump ahead, and you know, Stephen is also a brilliant innovator, a Nobel laureate, of course, in physics, but what makes you who you are? How are you able to do these things which government has found itself less able to accomplish as quickly?
Well, I mean, I think one way to think of government is to think of it as essentially a large corporation, or the largest corporation, and generally large corporations have a harder time with radical innovation than smaller companies. There are some exceptions to that rule, like Apple, but it's generally true that the larger a company is, the harder it is to execute innovation. Now, there are ways to get around that in the private sector by acquiring smaller companies that do the radical innovation, or by having someone like, say, Steve Jobs, who is just relentlessly hardcore about pushing radical innovation. But I think it is just generally true that the larger the corporation or larger the entity, the harder it is to engage radical innovation.
Well, Stephen, it seems to me, like sitting here at an ARPA-E conference, that ARPA-E is a very innovative notion of how do you move from the very large, maybe I would argue, risk-avoiding of our environment of government. And here you've got ARPA-E, which really is about encouraging, you know, maybe not risk, but investment, innovation. And we'd love you to reflect for a moment on how you think this experiment is going and what more needs to be done, particularly in the energy area of next-generation energy.
Right. Well, you know, going to the corporation analogy, I've got a CEO, the president. I got a very diverse board of directors, 535 of them.
It's a big board.
In Congress. But within that, there's many things you can do within the agency. Certainly, getting RPE going. That was, of course, voted on by Congress, proposed by the president. Lots of bipartisan support. But once you have the funding to say, let's get started, within the agency, you can then say, how can it be different? And so we went in there thinking this could be a new example of how we want to get a lot of Department of Energy programs. And it's, yes, you're going to have to take risks. That was designed into the program. It was written into the America Competes Act. That philosophy was written into Rising Above the Gathering Storm. That it's research, it's development, and it's very. We don't expect all those things to work, but they're short hits. This is not a long-term thing. This is a short hit. Get in there, see if it's going to work. It's going to be a home run. We wanted home runs. Now, after 3 years, you say, have there been home runs? Well, maybe not, but there's people rounding second and third base, so it's looking good. And then the culture in RPE is something else that is very different. You had a bunch of program managers who sit around and instead of politely presenting their program and advocating for their program, they would listen to what everyone else said and they would start to say, well, I'm not so sure that I believe that. What about this? What about that? And it was described as constructive confrontation. That was exactly the thing we got at Bell Laboratories. That, you're not going to politely wait your turn. You're going to all discuss this. The combined intellect of the group would develop those ideas. And that is very different. And of course, then there's a spirit that, my gosh, this is going to be something special. And so far, it has been very special.
So much grew out of Bell Labs, and of course, you were at Bell Labs. Is ARPA-E essentially there is no Bell Labs today. So I'm interested in whether that is a very harmful thing for the U.S. economy. Is that what ARPA-E is now replicating, and what do you think is important to sort of institutionalize that sort of constructive confrontation? How do you look at the future of that kind of big investment in basic research that would drive the country forward?
Well, to be fair, they're very, very different. Bell Labs research and development ultimately was to serve the company, and they had a financial bottom line. ARPA-E is, we are funders of other innovators. But the Bell Labs spirit I was talking about can be exactly the same. The quality of the people we got into the program were truly outstanding. And so that part of the Bell Labs spirit was there. But we're not there in business to do something. We're there to sponsor innovation that the private sector will pick up and run with.
Elon, to think a little bit about the agenda for today, which is essentially about innovation, you shared a while back, actually, in a forum that was organized by The Atlantic. This was done in San Diego at a forum we call the Atlantic Meets Pacific, and you spoke there and said, you had three real spheres that drove your interest. One was the internet, the other was sustainable energy, and the other was making life multiplanetary.
Right.
Would you like to share a little bit about the making life multiplanetary bit?
That might be slightly off topic, but I guess I can talk about it a little bit.
Not necessarily about getting there. Here's about the innovation with rockets, with space, with batteries in cars, which I assume are somehow in your mind integrated as component pieces of changing the way we live, creating sustainability, and thinking about moving into other spheres.
Well, the thing that really, when I was in university, I tried to think about what were the things that would most likely affect the future of humanity, at least as far as I could see. And the three things seem to be the internet, sustainable energy, which requires both producing it in a sustainable manner and consuming it in a sustainable manner, and then the third being extending life beyond Earth on a permanent basis, so become a true space-faring civilization, a multi-planet species. And I thought, as one sort of thinks about the future history of humanity, if we don't take those paths, then it will be really very different. If there was no internet, if we were unable to sell sustainable energy, obviously there would be economic collapse. If we were unable to become a spacefaring civilization, then eventually something would happen on Earth that would eliminate civilization as we know it. So I thought those three things needed to be addressed. And not that I expected actually in college that I would address them, but I didn't think it's not as though I thought I'd have an opportunity to do it. But that's essentially what connects them. There's not any other connection. With respect to, obviously the internet has happened, and it's amazing. It's transformed our life, and I think it's actually made humanity much more of a superorganism than we ever were before. And it's given humanity a nervous system. So it's like every cell in the body knows what the rest of the cells are doing, essentially, whereas previously that would occur via some sort of process, more like osmosis, as opposed to, your brain knowing what your toe knows.
Right.
You can be in the middle of the Brazilian jungle. If you have a satellite phone connection, you're connected to all of humanity's knowledge, which is pretty amazing. So, but I think as far as Earth is concerned, I think the biggest problem that humanity faces is one of sustainable energy. If we don't solve that problem this century, independent of any environmental concerns, we will face economic collapse. This is obvious. It's tautological, really. It's either sustainable
and
or
this
it's not
is part of what
sustainable.
you've brought into Tesla, that you're concerned about energy, batteries, and it brings us, really to Secretary Chu. You have a robust. You're one of the recipients of a large grant from the Department of Energy.
Not a
Tesla,
grant.
Or grant.
No, not a grant,
loan?
alone. Yes. If we'd like to change those terms, of course, this would be a good opportunity.
We were back in the green room, and I could tell a deal had just been done.
It's with interest, I should say.
With interest. Okay. In D.C., everything's a grant.
Good try.
Yeah. But in sustainable energy, I assume that the loan that you have with interest is really built around a partnership and looking at next generation batteries and opportunity in creating this. And so I'm interested in how you see your own product in this. And Stephen, I'd love to draw your thought on why this investment, well, not investment, loan makes sense.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think it's worth just talking a bit about the program under which we received the loan. It's called the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Program. It was actually signed into law by President Bush, although people think it was signed by Obama. No, it was actually signed by President Bush. And then there was I think quite a careful consideration of the applications that came in. And one of the requirements, actually, of that loan was that you had to be a viable company. And as a result, General Motors and Chrysler were ineligible at the time because they were going through bankruptcy proceedings. Unfortunately,
are they back to viability now in terms of the grant makers or the loan makers?
I think they're more or less back to being viable. That required, obviously, dramatic restructuring. But because the bailout of GM and Chrysler occurred roughly the same time as the announcements for the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Program were announced, people conflated those two and thought they were the same thing. They were very different things. And in fact, in order for us to the program is milestone based as well. So in order for us to receive portions of the loan, we must make progress along with concrete milestones. And I think that's a very sensible way to structure a program. And that's why, for example, one of the participants in the program, the disbursement stopped when that participant was unable to complete the milestones. So I think that's a very sensible way. I think it's really structured very well.
Are you hitting your milestones?
We've hit all of our milestones, yeah.
And Stephen, how do you feel about this program? Are the other car companies going to apply and try and move this forward? Is this something that Tesla's the single loan recipient of right now, or you? No. Okay.
First, they're not. As Elon said, GM and Chrysler were not eligible. Ford was. Ford applied for a loan, our largest loan. We think that that loan will be repaid. We have full confidence Ford. Nissan makes cars in Tennessee, including Nissan Leaf, and they wanted a loan to start, making cars in Tennessee like the Leaf. We think that loan is going to be repaid. Those are the two biggest loans to car companies. There are others which may be at risk, but I would say any new car company, but in those days, even Ford, Nissan was not considered a risk, but even Ford was considered risky. But what it did is it preserved over 35,000 jobs just for that one loan, Ford, and allowed them to retool to go to higher stage robotic automation, so that they can program on the line instead of programming to generate just one type of car. The line could be reprogrammed very, very quickly, in months, weeks, so that they can produce something else. So it gave them a manufacturing capability in the U.S. That would keep the jobs in the U.S. So now with Tesla, this is a very innovative company. Any new company bears some risk, but on the other hand, its way of innovation, the way it's pushing this, it's a totally different approach to an old electric vehicle. They're an incredibly vertically integrated company, meaning that they not only design the entire platform, the drive, the motor train, the electronics, they even design the test equipment for the acceptance of the parts. And they work with the suppliers. And I don't want to sound like an ad for Tesla,
No.
but I'm just saying
Please
that.
go on.
But this is the innovative, it's the best of American innovation in the sense that it's a totally different approach. It's a radical approach, and if successful, it's going to be the wave of the future.
One of the reasons why I like ARPA-E so much, and I've met many of the people who attend this meeting from last year and this year, is that there are real innovators and business people out there struggling, trying to kind of fix whatever puzzle they're dealing with. They're not only dealing with it within the U.S. context; they're dealing with the realities of a globalized world. And when you think about the kinds of, you're from South Africa. You're whether it's SpaceX or you're dealing with technology, you're now dealing with a global format. You are emphasizing U.S. jobs, U.S. technology, which I think is also important because there's a sense that stewardship here is something we need to get back to thinking about, and we may have lost that track. Do you get a sense, and let me ask you as a businessman, do you get a sense that the United States, you cited the Bush administration for signing this, but do you think we're beginning to shift? I remember a McKinsey report saying that America benefited tremendously from every offshore job. I remember in earlier presidential administrations, advisor to the president said it didn't matter what we made in the United States. A potato chip and a semiconductor chip are the same. And do you get a sense that some people call it industrial policy, but let's just call it a renewed sense that manufacturing and that creating things in the U.S. economy is back, and that takes smart policy. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Stephen. You're leaving your job soon, but you've been at this.
Yeah.
And it's a hard nut to get people to believe that the government can really make a positive impact.
Well, it is smart policy, but let me, it's a great question. Here's the thing. There are some who say a job is a job is a job. And service jobs are the same as manufacturing jobs. I strongly disagree. If you look at how the United States is embedded and how we got to where we are, and this is looking back but also looking forward, the jobs in manufacturing that you invent in America, you manufacture in America, you produce here, have all the other secondary service jobs associated with it, so that's greatly leveraged. The other more important thing to realize is if you looked over, there was Michael Spence, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, a friend of mine, happens to be from Stanford. He and a colleague of his published a paper about 8 months ago that looked at jobs and all the new jobs that were created in the United States over a 20-year period, and they divided it into service jobs, into manufacturing of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, all these things. But he really divided between what would be called things that you do that are tradable and things that are not tradable. Let me give you an example. If you're a farmer and you grow wheat or corn, that's tradable. You can ship it abroad. Cars are tradable. Things of that nature are tradable. What's not tradable? The U.S. Secretary of Energy is not tradable. It's the U.S. Secretary of Energy. Restaurant jobs are not tradable, right? It's serving that. Most hospital jobs are not tradable, okay? The job growth in the United States remarkably grew a lot. Very healthy time in the period in the United States, 1980 to 2000, 20 years. only in the non-tradable sector. Think about that. All the jobs were in the non-tradable sector. The job growth in the tradable sector was flat.
Right.
So now think about this. In areas where the United States has to compete globally, we didn't grow. Now, what you take that to its natural limit, you're in a very bad place because you still need to import things into the U.S. But we're not exporting things. You get to a very bad place. If I sell you pizza and you sell me blue jeans, that's okay, but eventually we're going to need something else from outside the U.S. And so on this larger context, this notion that you can give up manufacturing as a root foundation of the United States wealth is, I think, deeply flawed. It is part of, yes, most of our jobs are today service jobs, but manufacturing is a root foundation because those are tradable things. And not only that, in terms of the wide diversity and talents in the American public, you want, not everyone's going to be a stockbroker or something like that. And so that's another thing where, yes, good sensible policy to actually force us back to look at, in the long term, what will be good for our citizens.
Yeah, actually, if I may comment on that with respect to Tesla, we have as customers Mercedes and Toyota, so we supply electric powertrains to them, much of that being exported, and we have Tesla Roadsters have been exported now to 31 different countries. Long term, we expect probably something in the order of 60 to 65% of the cars that we manufacture will be exported to Europe and Asia, and then other parts of the world as well. So I do think that to just keying off your point, that isn't it. If other countries can export their cars to us, why can't we make cars that are good enough to export to them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Stephen?
Can I add to that? What I'm seeing for the first time, it's actually stimulated by the higher mileage standards that EPA and transportation put out. All of a sudden, cars being manufactured in the United States are now exportable because they're smaller, reliable, more fuel efficient. And so what you think would be a, quote, regulation telling us how to do our business is actually stimulating this thing in a very subtle way where if except from a few exceptions, if you're only making cars that get 15, 20 miles to a gallon, that's not mass market exportable. If you're making cars that get 35, 40, 45 miles a gallon, that is. And so that's another thing that's you see beginning to happen. The car manufacturers are beginning to say, you know what, we can build in the United States and export rather than build in another country.
Well, I remember I worked for Senator Bingaman in the 1990s. I remember at that time in this arena, we had Sandia National Laboratories there, and they had cooperative research and development agreements with very large firms like Intel, General Motors, and others. And the guys that were running the GM CRADA were very explicit and overt that they had the agreement to try and take all the dual use or non-national security technology they could get out of the agreement and to apply it to their facilities in China. And they said, if we didn't do that, we won't be there in 30 years. So this was raised interesting ethical questions for me as a taxpayer-supported national security research. But it's hard to get these equations right because technology flows, PhDs flow, and you have it. But while we have just a few minutes left, I'd like to ask you, you're both such giants in the world of innovation. And Elon, you've not just done, it's ironic because you've had some tough media recently in the New York Times. I was just reminded that this was entirely your fault, not because of bad cars, but Elon's first foray into business was a company called Zip2, which the New York Times was an investor in, and you actually helped take the New York Times online. That was years ago, I realized.
I think that's called hoist on your own petard.
Yeah. But from that and PayPal and Tesla, of course, Solar City, where I've interviewed a number of your friends and colleagues that have helped put that together. And Stephen, with you and your in your research work at Berkeley and others, forget yourself as a powerful Secretary of Energy, but just in terms of innovating, thinking out of the box, and doing things that no other people have done before. We have 3,000 people in the room who are struggling to find that kind of what are the right ingredients to make innovation work, not just innovation, but then disrupting incumbents, getting finance and capital, partnering in the right ways. And I'd love to just get 2 or 3 important lessons from you that this crowd should hear as they struggle with their own aspirations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think so you're looking for suggestions that people for executing on
Everyone
like, on
in
an
this
idea or
room wants to
company or
live
something like that.
do what you've done, but maybe in different areas.
I'm not sure they really knew that they would want that actually. Yeah, it's never as good as it seems. They think things are better these days, but for many years there it was very painful, and we almost lost everything back in 2008. So,
at Tesla?
yeah, actually all 3 companies almost died in 2008 because at SpaceX.
And you're still running 2 of the companies full time, right, as CEO?
Right.
How's that going for you?
I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not. I'm doing this because I think I have to, not because I want to. Okay, so that's maybe an important consideration.
So doing what you have to do. I also remember in our San Diego meeting, it was fascinating. You conveyed that the only limits on you and your aspirations were physics. I thought it was a really great line.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying that I can do anything within the limits of physics, but I'm saying if physics says you can't do it, then you probably can't.
Yeah.
Well, you should get a really big Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
One of the 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, generally important to observe the laws of thermodynamics and conservation of energy, momentum, and that kind of thing.
I see.
Yeah.
Stephen?
Yes, I would agree with
And
that.
I want to direct this to... Yeah. Okay, we're straight on laws of physics, but thoughts for innovators in the room?
I think when I look at both what I've done, it's a certain extent what Elon's done, what a number of people have done, you cast around and you look for areas that you begin to see either a glimmer of a new breakthrough type of thinking, or some technology in this sector has been left alone and not applied to that sector, or there's just a need based on an emerging market, and those are the things that actually can be real drivers for success in innovation. When you see a glimmer of a breakthrough, I mean, Elon was telling me when he was a graduate student, he was into energy storage and supercapacitors, things like that. And I think many of us saw 8-10 years ago, battery technology before that was crawling along, and all of a sudden you see, wait a minute, there's beginning to see something that will take a different slope. And if you think that it could take a different slope, do those things that develop that technology and surround you with people that help you develop that technology so you become the leader. Okay, but there's something behind you that's building wave that you're going to ride. And so that's very important. And so in the things I did in my research career when I was a graduate student, lasers had been demonstrated in the early 60s. The tunable laser was invented by 1970. By 1972, even though my thesis advisor had not been in lasers, didn't know lasers, I told him, you know what, we got to get into this technology. But you get into it not by purchasing a laser, you get into it by building the next best thing that keeps you ahead of the pack, and then you can do science no one else could do.
Yeah. I can make two recommendations, which actually do slightly key off physics, which is, I think a lot of times, if you want to do something really innovative, you have to apply a sort of first principles analysis, and don't reason by analogy. Analogies are referencing the past. First principles means you look at the most fundamental truths in a particular arena, and the things that really are almost indisputably correct, and you reason up from there to a conclusion. And if you see that conclusion is at odds with what people generally believe, then you have an opportunity. Now, you can't operate like that on all things because it takes too much mental horsepower. So most of your life you have to operate by reasoning by analogy. But if you really want to innovate, you must reason from first principles to identify the problem. And then you also should seek negative feedback. This sounds like a strange thing. And from your friends and from people who are knowledgeable. People will not give you the negative feedback.
Be cruel to be kind.
No, it's not. You need to understand where you're wrong. It's got nothing, and put feelings aside. And a lot of times people can look at what you're doing and they know that it's wrong, but they don't want to hurt your feelings, and that's why they don't tell you. So yeah.
Yeah, Stephen. Yeah, we're right at the end. But go ahead. You're the boss.
I agree with
for a few more days.
It'll be longer than that, but but I think I agree with everything Elon said. When you look at new technologies and you look at there could be think of wild claims, but what are the quote theoretical limitations, but not theoretical a la the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. There's a lower theory that says beyond this it's just it's not going to make it. And then where is the technology? And then you say, how much space is there between that realistically you can get there in 5 years? Okay. And that actually helps define things and focuses the mind on what you should be thinking about, what you shouldn't be thinking about. So there are many things like that that I think successful innovators do all the time. The constructive feedback, the honest feedback is exactly what we were establishing in RPE that's now being infected in the rest of the departments of energy. If you hear an idea that you don't really agree with, instead of politely sitting there and being polite, you say, no, I don't think that's right. This is why. You're wrong. And then you sit at a table and you talk about it. And that's where you figure out, are you right, are you wrong? And then you have a deeper understanding of what's going on. And that's the type of culture that we want that started in RPE. It certainly has to be continued in RPE, but to infect the rest of the Department of Energy.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come. Last word.
I can make an announcement that maybe
would
be interesting.
Everybody get Twitter out.
Yeah, exactly. So I really think that the DOE loan to Tesla should be viewed as a pretty significant success. I mean, we're exporting cars. We're selling powertrains to two of the most respected brands in the world, Mercedes and Toyota. We won electric car of the year last year. I mean, this is pretty good stuff. I mean, so if people are going to attack the DOE for bloody Solyndra, for God's sake, honestly, then there should be some praise for the DOE when there is a success.
I think you just helped DOE stock go up.
Yeah, and so actually I want to make a public commitment, and we're going to codify it, that Tesla is going to cut the payment time in half of the loan. So we have 10 years ahead of us for the loan, half or less.
Great. Well, we are 2 minutes and 47 seconds over, but I think when you're sitting with two of the most brilliant innovators in the United States, they can lend us that little extra time. I want to thank you both for sharing your insights into how to make this work. I know I teased you a little bit about the government-private sector thing, but what we're doing here, and I think what ARPA-E is doing, is so important, of essentially creating a platform, raising aspirationally where we need to go as a nation, bringing participants into this so that they can get constructive feedback, negative and positive, and that they've got real-world examples to see what you've done over and over and over again. If we had another hour or two, it's interesting, I've had an opportunity in my position to interview a lot of geniuses, and when you're around genius, it gives you an opportunity because people organize the way they see the world. These guys are slowing down a little bit for us right now. But when you're having a beer with them late at night, you can sort of see how they see the future and how they're operating, and it is really incredibly valuable to all of us and to people in the room that you take the time to share with us and give us some on-ramps into how you see innovation and how it works. So thank you so much.